Hey there everyone, how's it going? So today we'll continue with Unit 3 of the Learning Path Design Governance. And this is the second video of the series of Study With Me Azure. So let's get into it.
Design for management groups. Completed 100 XP. 3 minutes. Management groups are containers that help you manage access, policy, and compliance across multiple subscriptions. You can use management groups to limit the regions where virtual machines can be created across subscriptions. Provide user access to multiple subscriptions by creating one role assignment that's inherited by other subscriptions. Monitor and audit role and policy assignments across subscriptions.
So for the highest level of definition, it is trying to say that management groups are containers that help you manage access, policy, and compliance across multiple subscriptions. So all we need to know is that management groups is something that basically groups several subscriptions. And then the benefits it can provide are limit the regions where virtual machines can be created across subscriptions, provide user access to multiple subscriptions by creating one role assignment that's inherited by other subscriptions, monitor and audit role and policy assignments across subscriptions. So important is that everything we do at the management group level is across subscriptions. It is across subscriptions.
Things to know about management groups. As you plan the governance strategy for Tailwind traders, consider these characteristics of management groups. Management groups can be used to aggregate policy and initiative assignments via Azure Policy. A management group tree can support up to 6 levels of depth. This limit doesn't include the tenant root level or the subscription level. Azure role-based access control authorization for management group operations isn't enabled by default. By default, all new subscriptions are placed under the root management group. Things to consider when creating management groups.
So here we have some characteristics of management groups. Important is that since a management group includes several subscriptions, so we can aggregate the policies that we want to assign to several subscriptions. Then the management group itself can be nested within another management group, and this nesting can go up to 6 levels of depth. And then every new subscription will be placed first of all under the root management groups, and then we can move it around to other management groups.
Things to consider when creating management groups. Tailwind Traders has sales, corporate, and information technology departments. The sales department manages offices in the West and in the East. The corporate main office includes human resources, and legal. The IT department handles research, development, and production. There are currently 2 applications hosted in Azure. Here's a
So I believe these sections that has a title of things to consider are very crucial because as you see here it is explaining first of all a scenario for us, and this is a typical type of question that we get in the exam for the certification. So it's quite crucial to understand the scenario pretty well and then try to extract those relative information for the ultimate answer and for the ultimate design.
Here's a proposed management group hierarchy for your organization. Design management groups with governance in mind.
So the solution basically starts from here, and the picture I find it very interesting and very important. So we've got the tenant root group, and then under that it has created a new management group called Tailwind, and then every department on the Tailwind. So we've got the IT department, corporate sales, and IT would also contain productions. So is it this design exactly matches the information that we've got in this scenario. So we have sales department, corporate, information technology, IT, and so on and so forth. And then another important sentence here is that it says the sales department manages offices in the west and the east, which means there are two different offices. So probably they wanna have the billing boundary also separated for these offices, right? So that means there will be two subscriptions for the West Office and the East Office, but then both of them will be under the sales management group. Therefore, any policy relevant generally to the sales department can be applied to both subscription at the same time.
Design management groups with governance in mind. Use Azure policies at the management group level for all workloads that require the same security, compliance, connectivity, and feature settings. Use Azure policies at the
So management groups are key points in designing the governance. Therefore, it says design management groups with governance in mind. And then the word same probably is important here. So same security, same compliance, same connectivity, and same feature setting. When we have such a requirement in the scenario, then probably using a management group is applicable.
Use Azure policies at the management group level for all workloads. Keep the management group hierarchy reasonably flat. Plan the Tailwind Traders hierarchy to have no more than 3 or 4 levels of management groups. A hierarchy that's too flat doesn't provide flexibility and complexity for large organizations. A hierarchy with too many levels can be difficult to manage. Consider
So previously it has mentioned that management groups can be nested up to 6 levels deep. However, it is now recommending to stick with 3 or 4 levels of depth when it comes to management groups, and keeping the hierarchy. It is essentially recommending that keeping the hierarchy as flat as possible is beneficial at the end of the day in terms of management and monitoring.
Consider a top-level management group. Implement a top-level management group to support common platform policy and Azure role assignments across the entire organization. A Tailwind Traders management group can be a top-level management group for all organizational-wide policies.
So here it is essentially explaining why there is a management group called Tailwind directly under the root tenant group. That's basically a recommendation where it says in order to support common platform policy and Azure role assignment across the entire organizations, this approach might be beneficial to have one management groups that contains every other management groups within the organization.
A Tailwind Traders management group can be a top-level management group for all organizational-wide policies. Consider an organizational or departmental structure. Design your management groups based on the organizational structure to make it easy to understand. Separate the management groups for each Tailwind Traders department like sales, corporate, and IT.
So for design of the management groups, it is suggesting to keep the design of management groups based on the organizational structure. And the benefit to that would be that it is easy to understand, of course, because the structure of the organization is something that already exists. So we're not inventing anything new within Azure. And I can really understand this.
Separate the management groups for each Tailwind Traders department like sales, corporate, and IT. Consider a geographical structure. Build your management groups by using a geographical structure to allow for compliance policies in different regions. Allocate unique management groups for governance in the West and East sales regions for Tailwind Traders. Consider a
So geographical structure can also be a good candidate for designing management groups based on. And this way, it will allow us for compliance policies in different regions to be applied correctly, and it's easier to manage. For instance, for governance in the West and East sales region for Tailwind traders, and that's exactly why we've read earlier that the sales department has two offices, one in West, one in East. So probably there will be two subscriptions here that can be then managed in terms of policies and compliance through one management group, so everything is consolidated at one place.
Consider a production management group. Institute a production management group to create policies that apply to all corporate products. A production management group for Tailwind traders can provide product-specific policies for corporate applications. Consider a sandbox management group.
So production management group, um, that's of course quite understandable. It will give us the flexibility to create policies that apply to all corporate products, and the products will ultimately run on production environment. So it is essentially separating the workloads based on the environment.
Consider a sandbox management group. Offer a sandbox management group for users to experiment with Azure. The sandbox provides isolation from your development, test, and production environments. Users can experiment with resources that might not yet be allowed in official Tailwind traders' production environments. Consider isolation.
So this item basically provides flexibility to the employees of the organization. If we create a sandbox management groups, then we can offer people to play around with the workloads and do some try and error ultimately before going to production. And it can also isolate the environments such as development, test, and production environment. So a sandbox management groups is quite beneficial in different aspects.
Consider isolating sensitive information in a separate management group. Secure sensitive data by using a corporate management group for Tailwind traders. The separate management group provides both standard and enhanced compliance policies for the main office. All units complete.
So sensitive information can also be a good candidate for being isolated in a separate management groups. And this is of course to secure that sensitive data. And obviously for such management groups, stricter policies would be applied and created. All right, let's continue with the next unit. So design for subscriptions.
All units complete. Complete module. For issues related to this module, explore Design for subscriptions. Completed 100 XP. 3 minutes. Azure subscriptions are logical containers that serve as units of management and scale and billing boundaries. Limits and quotas can be applied, and each organization can use subscriptions to manage costs and resources by group. Things to know about subscriptions.
So that's just an introduction. This is the information that we have read before. Subscription is a logical container that gives flexibility in terms of scaling and billing boundaries.
Things to know about subscriptions. To use Azure, you must have an Azure subscription. A subscription provides you with a logical container to create and pay for Azure products and services. There are several types of subscriptions, such as Enterprise Agreement and Pay-as-you-go. As you plan the governance strategy for Tailwind traders, consider these characteristics.
So this part of information were also provided before. To use Azure, having at least one subscription is mandatory. And the subscription is the building block that provides us the ability to create workloads and use Azure products and Azure services. We've got different types of subscriptions, and two of them were mentioned here, such as enterprise agreement and pay-as-you-go, which pay-as-you-go is probably the most common one that most of the people will use. So here we have a picture, and we are on their things to know about subscription sections, which sounds like an important title.
As you plan the governance strategy for Tailwind traders, consider these characteristics of subscriptions. Subscriptions can provide separate billing environments, such as development, test, and production. Policies for individual subscriptions can help satisfy different compliance standards. You can organize specialized workloads to scale beyond the limits of an existing subscription. By using subscriptions, you can manage and track costs for your organizational structure. Things to consider when creating
So 4 characteristics of subscriptions are mentioned here, such as having the billing environment separated for different environment, for development, for test, for production. Then having the possibility to apply policies in order to satisfy different compliance standards. So, which essentially tries to say if you have multiple subscriptions, then you can apply multiple or various policies to each of them if you need to stay compliant with different standards, such as like European standards, American standards. Then it also allows for scaling beyond the limits of an existing subscription. Yeah, this was also mentioned before that subscriptions also provide scaling abilities. And because subscription is the billing boundary for the workloads, we can also track costs for the organization structure using the subscription section of Azure.
things to consider when creating subscriptions. You defined your strategy for the Tailwind Traders Management Group structure. Now you need to determine where to assign subscriptions. Here's one possible solution. Treat subscriptions as a democratized unit of management. Align your subscriptions to meet specific Tailwind Traders' business needs and priorities.
So from now on, it is mentioning that suppose we have done our design in terms of management groups, and now we need to determine what kind of subscription to put under each management groups. So this picture is essentially a completed version of the picture that we had in the previous unit. And I can see that one thing that I mentioned in the previous unit is already created and added here. We've got 2 subscriptions under the sales department, one for the West office and one for the East office. Then some other subscriptions, for instance, for the IT department, that has created an R&D subscription, and then the organization is probably providing multiple applications. Therefore, there are different subscriptions under the production management groups. So, and then here we are reading about things to consider when creating subscriptions. So the first point was treating subscription as a democratized unit of management. Allowing your subscriptions to meet specific Tailwind traders' business needs and priorities. Yeah, so this sentence is pretty much self-explanatory. The subscriptions should ultimately meet the specific requirements of the business.
Align your subscriptions to meet specific Tailwind Traders' business needs and priorities. Group subscriptions together under management groups. Group together subscriptions that have the same set of policies and Azure role assignments to inherit these settings from the same management group. For Tailwind traders, both the West and East subscriptions can inherit policy settings from the sales management group. Consider a dedicated shared.
Yeah, grouping subscriptions is something that needs to be considered, and that is done through management groups. And the key benefit to grouping subscription is that the policies can be inherited from the upper level. So if there is a policy that needs to be applied into multiple subscriptions, then it can be easily done on the higher level.
Consider a dedicated shared services subscription. Use a shared services subscription to ensure all common network resources are built together and isolated from other workloads. Examples of shared services subscriptions include Azure ExpressRoute and Virtual WAN.
All right, so this shared subscription that we have here, it is explaining that we have to put common workloads that the other applications use probably into the shared subscription, and that will give us the ability to have flexible management on the things that are generally required by every application. And two good candidates to be placed under the shared subscription are Azure ExpressRoute and Virtual WAN, which are essentially for connecting on-premise databases, on-premise data centers into with Azure Data Center. So that was all about shared subscription.
Consider subscription scale limits. Subscriptions serve as a scale unit for component workloads. Large, specialized workloads like high-performance computing, IoT, and SAP are all better suited to use separate subscriptions. By having separate subscriptions for different Tailwind traders groups or tasks, you can avoid resource limits, such as a limit of 50 Azure Data Factory integrations. Consider a
So here we're talking about the scaling ability, and so the key point to remember is that we've got a limit of resources for each subscription. So for instance, the 50 Azure Data Factory integrations within one subscription, and therefore it's mentioning that by using multiple subscriptions, then we can go beyond this limit of resources.
Consider administrative management. Subscriptions provide a management boundary, which allows for a clear separation of concerns. Will each subscription for Tailwind traders need a separate administrator, or can you combine subscriptions? The corporate management group could have a single subscription for both the HR and legal departments.
And here we're talking about the administrative aspects. Of course, each department or each subscription needs to be administrated in a certain way. And by having multiple subscriptions for each department, we will have a separation of concerns, so they can be administered in a way that they need to be. However, it is also mentioning that the HR department and the legal department can be combined into one subscription, and it all depends how the organization wants to administrate those subscription.
Consider how to assign Azure policies. Both management groups and subscriptions serve as a boundary for the assignment of Azure policies. Workloads like those for the payment card industry, PCI, typically require extra policies to achieve compliance. Rather than using a management group to group workloads that require PCI compliance, you can achieve the same isolation with a subscription. These types of decisions ensure you don't have too many Tailwind traders management groups with only a few subscriptions.
All right, so this part is essentially trying to say that we have to find a sweet spot of multiple subscriptions and multiple management groups. If we create a lot of management groups, then it can get out of hand quickly. And similarly, if we create a lot of subscriptions, then again, the management would be difficult. So we have to balance these, and whatever type of isolation in terms of Azure policies that we want to achieve, we can both achieve that through management groups and subscription. So it all goes back to the requirement and the style of management and monitoring to decide how many management groups we need to create and how many subscriptions we have to create and which subscription we have to put under which management groups.
Consider network topologies. Virtual networks can't be shared across subscriptions. Resources can connect across subscriptions with different technologies, such as virtual network peering or virtual private networks, VPNs. Consider which Tailwind traders' workloads must communicate with each other when you decide if a new subscription is required.
So networking is probably one of the limitations when it comes to having multiple subscriptions. Of course, virtual networks cannot be shared or cannot be created across multiple subscriptions. They can only be used within the same subscription. So for the virtual networks, we have to specifically be careful that where do we put the workloads that are using this virtual network. If the workloads are in another subscription, then the virtual network has to be created in that subscription. Otherwise, it cannot be shared between multiple subscriptions. However, we've got one solution for that. We can connect or we can peer these virtual networks between subscription using a technology like VPN. But then this will again, I believe, increase the complexity. So I believe at the end of the day, if we can create the network within the same subscription that the workloads are existing in there, that will be the best and ideal option. Otherwise, if we have to have the network in another subscription, then creating VPNs to peer the networks would eventually be a solution for that.
Consider making subscription owners aware of their roles and responsibilities. Conduct a quarterly or biannual access review by using Microsoft Entra Privileged Identity Management. Access reviews ensure privileges don't proliferate as users move within the Tailwind Traders customer organization. Note:
So having multiple subscriptions means that each subscription can be administrated differently. Therefore, usually each subscription will have a certain owner, and it is suggesting that we've got to do quarterly or biannual access review to make sure anybody that has certain access within the subscription still needs that access, and we're not breaching any compliance, because of course Azure always recommends to stay with the least privilege access level. So that means each user will only have the accesses that he or she needs and nothing more. All right. It is also quite crucial in terms of movers. When we have somebody that moves from one department to another department within the organization, then his or her access needs to be reviewed, so that this stuff that they don't need anymore has to be removed from their accounts, and probably new access for the destination department has to be added for his role.
Note: when it comes to subscriptions, one size doesn't fit all. A solution that works for one business unit might not be suitable for another. Explore your options. All units
So at the end of the day, designing subscriptions or like having multiple subscription is has a trade-off, and that's of course an engineering decision to decide how many subscriptions to create, how many management groups to create, and how to organize them. All right, Unit 4 is ended here, I believe, and therefore I'm going to end the video as well. We'll continue from Unit 5 in the future videos. Thanks for sticking around.